You carry something heavy, don't you? This familiar weight of what you did, what you didn't do, who you were back then. And you know it by heart now. Every detail, every mistake. You've rehearsed it so many times that the punishment has become a kind of companion, a dark, reliable presence that tells you exactly who you are. But something shifts when you consider letting it go. When you imagine releasing this grip on your past, something tightens in your chest. Because if you're not the person who did that thing, if you're not defined by that failure or that shame, then who are you? The punishment has been protecting you from something, from this moment, from the uncertainty of standing here without a story to explain yourself, without a reason for why things feel the way they do. You've been holding on to the past so tightly because it gives you something to do, something to focus on. While you're busy reviewing what happened, cataloguing your failures, maintaining the case against yourself, you don't have to look at what's here, right now. This restlessness, this quiet dissatisfaction, this sense that something is missing, but you can't name what it is. The past is finished, it's done. But you keep it alive by returning to it, by feeding it your attention, by making it mean something about who you are today. You've turned memory into identity. And now that identity needs the punishment to survive. Because if you stopped, if you actually let yourself off the hook, you'd have to meet yourself as you are, not as you were, not as the story you've been telling, but as this breathing, uncertain person who doesn't quite know what comes next. And that's terrifying, isn't it? To be here without the familiar script, without the comfortable ache of regret to organize your days around. To just be this person right now with all the messiness and incompleteness that comes with being alive. The punishment has become a way of not living. A way of staying safely in the past where everything is already decided, already known, where you can control the narrative because it's already happened. But this moment is wide open, unpredictable, and you can't punish your way through it. You think the punishment is about justice, about holding yourself accountable. But watch closely. See how it keeps you from moving. See how it keeps you from being present with the people in your life. See how it keeps you from feeling anything new because you're so busy feeling the same old guilt. The Buddha said, "You, yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your compassion." But compassion feels dangerous, doesn't it? Because if you're not bad, if you're not fundamentally flawed, then you have to show up. You have to participate. You have to risk making new mistakes, having new regrets, being seen as you actually are instead of hiding behind who you used to be. The punishment has been a kind of hiding, a way of saying, "Don't look at me now, look at what I did then. Don't ask anything of me today because I'm still dealing with yesterday." It's kept you small, kept you safe, kept you from having to discover what you might become if you stopped carrying this weight. And maybe that's the real fear. Not that you'll forget, not that you'll become careless or cruel, but that you'll have to find out who you are when you're not defined by your worst moments, when you're not held together by shame. Who are you without this story? Without this familiar suffering? You don't know. And not knowing feels like falling. So you hold on. You keep punishing. You keep the past alive because at least it's something, at least it's solid. Even if it hurts, at least you know where you stand. But the past isn't solid. It's not even here. It's a thought appearing now. A feeling arising now. A story you're telling yourself now. And every time you return to it, you're choosing it over this moment, over this breath, over whatever is actually here. The question isn't whether you deserve to stop punishing yourself. The question is, what are you avoiding by continuing? What are you not willing to face? What might you have to feel or do or become if you finally let yourself be here? And maybe you don't have an answer. Maybe you just feel the tightness of the question, the way it touches something true, the way it reveals the mechanism you've been using to stay hidden from your own life. You don't have to fix this. You don't have to figure it out right now. But you can see it. You can feel how the punishment works, how it keeps you bound to what's gone, how it protects you from what's here. And in the seeing, something loosens. Not because you solved anything, but because you stopped pretending you don't know what you're doing. The past is finished, but you're still here, still breathing, still capable of this moment, whatever it holds. You replay the conversation again. The words you said, the ones that didn't land right, the ones that came out wrong. You see their face, the pause, the shift in the room. And now, here in your mind, you say it differently. You correct yourself. You smooth it over. You make it better. But nothing changes. The conversation is over. It happened. It's done. And still, you're there, rewriting it, as if the right words in your mind could reach back through time and fix what was said out loud. What are you protecting by doing this? Not the conversation. That's already gone. Not the other person. They've moved on, or they haven't, but either way, they're not in this room with you right now. You're alone with the replay. Alone with the editing. Alone with the hope that if you just get it right this time, something will feel resolved. But it never does it? You replay it again, and again. The words shift slightly. You sound calmer, clearer, kinder. You sound like the version of yourself you wish you had been, and for a moment maybe it feels like relief. But then the real memory returns, what you actually said, what actually happened, and the gap between the two opens again, and you feel it. That ache, that wrongness. So you protect yourself by replaying. By rehearsing a version that never was. Because if you stop replaying, if you let the conversation be what it was, then you have to feel something else. You have to face the discomfort of not being who you wanted to be in that moment, of saying the wrong thing, of being seen in a way you didn't choose. And that's unbearable, isn't it? To be imperfect out loud, to be clumsy or reactive or unclear. To be human in a way that can't be taken back. The replaying is a kind of resistance, a refusal to let the moment be what it was. You're trying to protect an image. Not just the image the other person has of you, but the image you have of yourself. The one where you're composed, where you know what to say, where you don't stumble or say too much or say too little. But that image isn't you. It's a story you're clinging to, even as life keeps showing you that you can't always live up to it. The Buddha said, you cannot travel the path before you have become the path itself. You keep trying to rewrite the path you already walked. As if by changing the memory, you could change who you were in that moment. As if you could go back and become someone else. But you can't. The moment happened. You were who you were. You said what you said. And now it's over. What you're protecting is the belief that you should have been different, that you could have been, that if you had just thought faster, or felt less, or been more careful, the moment would have gone the way you needed it to. But the moment didn't ask for your permission. It unfolded the way it did. And you were in it as you were, with all your limitations and reactions and humanness, and that's what you can't accept. Not the other person's response, not what they think of you now, but the fact that you weren't in control, that you couldn't script it, that you were vulnerable, and it showed. So you replay it, trying to take back control, trying to prove to yourself that you could have done it differently, that you're not the person who said that thing, who felt that way, who stumbled. You're the person in the revised version, the one who gets it right. But which version is real? The one that happened, or the one you keep creating? You already know the answer. And that's the discomfort you're avoiding. The conversation is gone. It's not coming back. No amount of replaying will change it. The only thing the replaying does is keep you from being here, now, where nothing needs to be fixed because nothing can be. What if you didn't replay it again? What if you let the words you said be the words you said? What if you let yourself be the person who said them, without editing, without protecting, without trying to become someone else in your mind? What would you feel then? Maybe shame, maybe regret, maybe the quiet, uncomfortable truth that you're not always who you want to be, that you can't control how you're seen, that you're impermanent, even to yourself. And maybe that's what you're protecting against, not their judgment, yours. The replaying keeps you busy. It keeps you in the story. It keeps you from sitting with the simple, unadorned fact that the moment is over and you are still here, and nothing you think will change what was. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to make it right. You don't have to become the version of yourself that never stumbled. You just have to let it be what it was and see what remains when you stop protecting. You do it all the time, don't you? You look at someone's face and you know. You know they're disappointed. You know they're judging you. You know they think you're not enough or too much or somehow wrong. It's not even a guess. It feels like certainty. Like you can see right through them into what they're really thinking about you. And yet, your own thoughts are everywhere. They scatter and loop and contradict themselves. One moment you're sure of something, the next moment you've forgotten what you were even worried about. You lose track of what you meant to say. You can't remember if you're angry or just tired. Your mind changes its story about yourself 5 times before lunch. But their mind, that one you know. Watch how this happens. Someone doesn't text back and immediately you know why. They're annoyed with you. They're pulling away. They've finally seen who you really are. You build an entire story about what's happening inside them, and the story feels so real that you start to react to it. You feel hurt by thoughts they never had. You defend yourself against judgments they never made. You withdraw to protect yourself from a rejection that only exists in your interpretation. And the strange thing is, you're not making this up to be cruel to yourself. You genuinely believe you're seeing clearly. You think you're being realistic, perceptive, aware. You think this is wisdom, this ability to read between the lines, to sense what's really going on beneath the surface. But is it? Or is it just your fear, casting its shape onto someone else's silence? You do this because uncertainty is harder to hold than a bad story. Not knowing what someone thinks feels like danger. So your mind rushes in to fill the space. It creates certainty out of nothing. A look, a pause, a shift in tone. Your mind takes these tiny, ambiguous things and builds a complete narrative. And then you live inside that narrative as if it's fact. You can track their thoughts, you believe. You can predict their reactions. You can see their disappointment before they even know they're disappointed. But your own mind? That's a mystery. It changes, it contradicts itself. It wants one thing and then wants the opposite. It tells you you're fine, and then an hour later tells you everything is falling apart. You can't even hold on to your own certainty about yourself. And yet you're certain about them. There's something almost comforting in this, isn't there? When you think you know what they're thinking, you feel like you have some control. You can prepare. You can adjust, you can try to fix it before it gets worse. But when you admit you don't know, when you admit their mind is as mysterious and changing as your own, you're left with nothing to hold on to. Just the raw uncertainty of being with another person who is separate from you. Who has their own weather inside? Who might be thinking about you, or might be thinking about what to have for dinner, or might not be thinking much at all? The Buddha said, "We are what we think." All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. You are making their world inside your head. You are creating their thoughts, their judgments, their disappointments. And then you are suffering from the world you made. This isn't about being wrong or right. It's not about whether you're sometimes accurate or not. It's about the grasping, the need to know. The need to be certain about something that is, by its nature, unknowable. You cannot be inside their experience. You cannot see their thoughts. You can barely see your own. And yet you keep reaching for that certainty over and over because the alternative feels too vulnerable. Not knowing means you might be surprised. You might be wrong. You might have to simply be with someone without the story, without the script, without knowing what comes next. And that's terrifying. So you keep telling yourself you know. You keep building the thoughts they must be having. You keep living in a world where you have to manage what you imagine is happening in someone else's mind, while your own mind slips and shifts beneath you like water. What if you didn't know? What if, just for a moment, you let their thoughts be unknown, let them stay inside their own experience, where they actually are? What if you stopped trying to read their mind and just noticed how much energy it takes to keep building these stories, to keep maintaining this false certainty? You might feel more lost, more uncertain, more vulnerable. But you might also feel the relief of putting down something you were never meant to carry. Their thoughts are theirs. Yours are barely yours. Everything is moving. Everything is changing. And you don't know. You've never known. You're just here, guessing in the dark, calling it sight. You know that moment. The silence settles around you. Maybe you're sitting at your desk between tasks. Maybe you're waiting for the kettle to boil. Maybe you just woke up and the morning hasn't quite started yet, and your hand moves. Almost before you notice it, your hand is already reaching. The phone is there before the silence can stay. What are you running from? Not running in the obvious way. Not panic, not terror, just this quiet turning away, this small escape that happens so quickly you barely see it. The silence was there, and then it wasn't. And in between, there was this reaching. What lives in that silence that you cannot be with? Maybe it's the feeling of being alone with yourself, not lonely exactly, just alone, just you. Sitting there with nothing to distract you from the fact that you're sitting there. The silence makes it obvious. Here you are, and when you're here, really here, there's a kind of nakedness to it. There's nowhere to hide from what you're feeling, nowhere to hide from what you're not feeling. The silence shows you that you're restless, that you're uncomfortable, that something in you is always wanting to be somewhere else, doing something else, feeling something else. And the phone promises relief. It promises that you won't have to feel this. It promises noise, movement, color, other people's lives, other people's thoughts, anything but this quiet discomfort of being here, now, with nothing happening. But what is this discomfort really? You reach for the phone because something feels wrong. The silence feels empty. It feels like a lack. Like something should be filling this space. Like you should be doing something, knowing something, feeling something more interesting than what you're feeling right now. And so you fill it. You scroll, you check, you refresh, you give yourself something to hold on to. But the discomfort doesn't come from the silence. The discomfort comes from wanting the silence to be something else. It comes from resisting what's actually here. The silence itself is just silence. It's neutral. It's spacious. But you meet it with this tight feeling, this sense that it shouldn't be here, that you shouldn't have to feel this way, that there must be something better available to you right now if you just look for it. And so you look, you reach, you escape. And for a moment, it works. The phone gives you something, a notification, a message, a headline, a photo of someone else's life, and your mind latches onto it. The discomfort fades. The silence is gone. You're occupied now. You're somewhere else. But then you put the phone down, and the silence returns, and the discomfort returns, and the reaching begins again. Because you never actually left, you never actually escaped, you just covered over what was here. You just distracted yourself from the feeling you didn't want to feel. And the feeling is still there, underneath, waiting. The Buddha said, the root of suffering is attachment. And what are you attached to in that moment of reaching? You're attached to not feeling this. You're attached to comfort. You're attached to stimulation. You're attached to the idea that silence should not feel this way, that you should not feel this way, that something is wrong and needs to be fixed. And the phone is the fix. Except it never fixes anything. It just postpones. It just delays the moment when you have to sit with what's actually here. What if the discomfort is not the problem? What if the discomfort is just what happens when you resist what is? The silence is impermanent. The discomfort is impermanent. Even the reaching is impermanent. It all arises and passes. But you're trying to make it pass faster. You're trying to control the experience. You're trying to skip over the part that feels uncomfortable and get to the part that feels better. But there is no part that feels better. There's just this, and then this, and then this. When you reach for the phone, you're running from the present moment. You're running from the feeling of being here, unoccupied, unentertained, undefined by what you're doing or consuming or knowing. You're running from the groundlessness of just being, because just being doesn't feel like enough. It feels empty. It feels boring. It feels like something's missing. And maybe something is missing. Maybe what's missing is the story. The story about who you are and what you should be doing and what your life should look like. In the silence, that story gets quiet. And without the story, who are you? What are you? Just this awareness, just this breathing, just this sitting. And that can feel like nothing. It can feel like not enough. So you reach for the phone to remember the story, to fill the space, to feel like someone again. But you were always here. The silence never took you away. You just couldn't bear to see what was actually present. And it's still here now, this moment, this breath, this quiet discomfort of being alive without knowing what it means. You're tired right now, aren't you? Not just physically tired. Tired in that deeper way that doesn't go away after sleep. And still, you're waiting. Waiting for something to tell you it's okay to stop. Maybe you're waiting for the work to be finished, for the inbox to be empty, for someone to notice how much you've done and say, that's enough now, you can rest. Or maybe you're waiting for yourself to feel like you've done enough, pushed enough, proven enough. Like rest is something you receive only after you've paid for it. Notice how you move through your day, how you keep going even when your body is asking you to pause. How you override that quiet voice that says, I need to sit down because there's still more to do. There's always more to do. And underneath that doing, there's a belief running like a current, rest must be earned. Where did you learn this? Who taught you that your worth is measured by your productivity, that stillness is laziness, that stopping means failing? You probably can't even remember. It's just there now, woven into how you think about yourself. You rest only when you've justified it, only when you've accumulated enough hours, enough tasks, enough exhaustion to make it permissible. And even then, when you finally do rest, you don't really rest, do you? You rest with guilt. You rest while thinking about what you should be doing instead. You rest while checking your phone, planning tomorrow, reviewing today. Your body is still, but your mind is running laps, calculating whether you've done enough to deserve this moment of not doing. This is the trap. You're waiting for permission that will never come. Because the one you're waiting for permission from is you. And you've made the conditions impossible. Enough is always just beyond reach. The finish line keeps moving. You think if you just do a little more, push a little harder, get a little further ahead, then you'll finally be able to rest without guilt. But that moment never arrives, does it? You keep building the case for your own exhaustion. You keep adding to the pile of proof that you need rest, as if rest requires a courtroom defense, as if you need to convince yourself that your tiredness is legitimate. But here's what's happening. You're creating your own suffering. Not because you're working too hard, but because you're believing that your value depends on how much you produce. You're clinging to the idea that rest is a reward, not a necessity. that you are what you accomplish. That stopping means losing something essential about who you are. And so you wait. You wait for permission from a boss, a partner, a voice inside you that will finally say, "You've done enough." But that voice is silent. Or it speaks, and you don't believe it, because you've trained yourself not to. The Buddha said, "You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. Not after you've earned it, not when you've finished everything, now, as you are. Tired and unfinished and still carrying tomorrow's worries, but you don't believe that, do you? You believe rest is for people who've completed their tasks, for people who are ahead, for people who aren't you. And this belief, this simple thought that rest must be earned, creates a life of constant striving. A life where you're always behind, always in debt to your own expectations, where peace is always conditional, where you never quite arrive. You can feel it, can't you? That tension in your chest, that restlessness even when you're sitting still. That voice that says, you shouldn't be here, you should be doing something. It's exhausting, and it never stops. Because the rules you've created for yourself have no end point. What if rest doesn't need to be earned? What if it's not a reward for productivity, but simply what a body needs to continue being a body? What if your worth isn't tied to your output at all? You don't have to answer that. You don't have to fix this. Just notice it. Notice how you've been waiting. Notice how tired you are of waiting. Notice how the permission you're seeking is something you're withholding from yourself. And notice that even now, reading this, part of you is thinking about what you should be doing instead. Part of you is already moving ahead to the next thing, the next task, the next proof of your worth. You're here and you're tired and you're waiting for permission that you keep refusing to give yourself. Just see it. That's all. Just see how you've been living, how you've been carrying this belief like a stone, how heavy it is, how long you've been carrying it. You don't need to put it down. You don't need to change anything. Just see that it's there, that you're holding it, that you've been holding it all along. You've noticed something, haven't you? That small, quiet moment when you hear about someone else's difficulty, their setback, their confusion, their failure, and something in you relaxes. Just a little. Just enough to feel like you're doing okay by comparison. It's not that you wish them harm. You might even feel sympathy. But underneath that sympathy, there's this other thing, this measuring, this checking, as if their struggle confirms something about where you stand. What does it say about you that you need this? Maybe it says you're afraid. Afraid that without their difficulty to stand beside, you wouldn't know if you're moving forward at all. Because progress is so hard to see when you're inside your own life, isn't it? You wake up, you go through your days, and nothing feels particularly different. Nothing feels resolved. So you look outward. You look at them, and their struggle becomes your measuring stick. But notice what happens when you do this. Notice how it never quite settles anything. You feel better for a moment, yes. You feel like maybe you're not so lost after all. But then that feeling fades, and you need to measure again. You need another comparison, another struggle that isn't yours, another confirmation that you're ahead, or at least not behind. This is the trap, isn't it? That the relief never lasts. Because you're building your sense of progress on something that keeps shifting. Their struggle changes. Or you hear about someone else who's doing better than you. Or you realize that the thing you felt good about avoiding is actually the thing you're facing now, just in a different form. And suddenly, the ground disappears again. You're trying to know yourself through someone else's pain. You're trying to feel solid by standing on something that was never solid to begin with. Comparison is like that. It promises clarity, but it only gives you more hunger, more need to check, more need to measure. Because the question underneath never gets answered. The question underneath is, am I okay? And you keep asking it through them, through their struggles, through their setbacks, as if their difficulty could ever tell you something true about your own life. But it can't, because your life isn't happening in comparison to theirs. Your life is happening right here, in this moment, in this body, in this mind that keeps reaching outward, trying to find something stable to hold on to. The Buddha said, "You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your compassion. Not their struggle, not their failure, not the relief you feel when you realize you're not where they are, just you, as you are, without the measuring." But that's harder, isn't it? To sit with yourself without knowing if you're doing well or doing poorly. To just be here without the comparison. Because then you have to face the uncertainty, the not knowing, the possibility that progress isn't something you can see or measure or confirm by looking at someone else's life. Maybe progress isn't even what you think it is. Maybe what you're calling progress is just another way of trying to feel safe. Trying to feel like you're moving in the right direction. Trying to feel like you're not wasting your time or your life or your one chance to get this right. But who decides what's right? Who decides what progress looks like? You do. And you keep deciding based on where they are, based on what they're going through, based on whether you're ahead or behind or somewhere in the middle of a race that no one actually agreed to run. And all the while, your own life is here, waiting, not comparing itself to anyone, just being what it is, imperfect, uncertain, unfinished, just like theirs, just like everyone's. What does it say about you that you need their struggle? Maybe it says you're human. Maybe it says you're scared. Maybe it says you've forgotten that your life doesn't need to be measured to be lived. And maybe that's enough to see, not to fix, not to change, not to stop comparing and start doing something else instead. Just to see it, to notice the reaching, to notice the hunger, to notice how the relief never lasts and how you keep going back, keep checking, keep measuring. Because in the seeing, something shifts, not dramatically, not permanently, but enough to feel the ground beneath you again. The ground that was always there. The ground that doesn't need anyone else's struggle to hold you up. You're here, they're there. And the space between you isn't a measuring stick, it's just space. You wake up, and the first thing you notice isn't the light coming through the window or the sound of birds outside. The first thing you notice is whether the anxiety is there. You scan your body before your feet touch the floor. Is it in your chest? Your throat? Is today going to be one of those days? And if it's not there yet, you wait for it. You move through your morning, waiting. Brushing your teeth, making coffee, checking your phone, all of it done with one part of you standing guard, watching for the feeling to arrive. Because it always does, doesn't it? Maybe not this hour, but later. Maybe not today, but tomorrow. So you live carefully. You avoid certain situations. You say no to invitations. You keep your world small and predictable because a small world feels safer, and maybe it is safer. Maybe you do feel the anxiety less when you stay inside these walls you built. But here's what's happening. You're not just afraid of the anxiety anymore. You're afraid of your whole life. You're afraid of the phone ringing. Afraid of plans changing. Afraid of feeling too much or wanting too much or being seen too much. The anxiety has become the lens through which you see everything. And the waiting has become its own kind of suffering. You wait for it to arrive. You wait for it to pass. You wait for the day when you'll finally be free of it, when you'll wake up and it will be gone for good, and your real life can begin. The life where you're calm, where you're confident, where you don't have to think about your breathing or your heartbeat or whether you can handle what comes next. But that day keeps moving further away. Because while you're waiting, you're also feeding the very thing you're trying to escape. Every time you scan your body for signs of anxiety, you're telling yourself there's something to fear. Every time you avoid a situation because it might trigger the feeling, you're reinforcing the belief that you can't handle it. Every time you put your life on hold until the anxiety leaves, you're making the anxiety the center of everything. You built a life around not feeling something, and that takes enormous energy. It takes constant vigilance. It takes saying no to moments that might be beautiful or meaningful or alive, because those moments might also include discomfort. And the anxiety knows this. It doesn't need to be there all the time anymore. It just needs you to keep watching for it. It just needs you to keep organizing your entire existence around its possible arrival. So the question isn't really whether you're more afraid of the anxiety or of the waiting. The question is, can you see that they've become the same thing? The waiting is the anxiety. The guarding is the anxiety. The scanning and the avoiding and the hoping and the controlling, all of it is the anxiety, just wearing different clothes. Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "The fear of suffering is worse than the suffering itself." And you can feel the truth of that, can't you? The actual moments of anxiety, they come and they go, they rise and they fall. But the fear of those moments, the waiting for those moments, that's constant. That's the background hum of your entire day. You're not living in the present moment, you're living in the next moment, the one where the anxiety might show up, or you're living in some future moment where it's finally gone. But you're never here. You're never in this breath, this step, this ordinary moment that isn't asking anything of you. And life is only ever happening here. Not in the safe future you're waiting for, not in the anxiety-free version of yourself you're trying to become. Here. In this moment that already contains everything, including the discomfort, including the uncertainty, including the fear. You can't wait your way out of this. You can't avoid your way out. You can't make yourself small enough or still enough or perfect enough that the anxiety will finally decide you're not worth visiting anymore. It's not about the anxiety leaving. It's about you stopping the waiting, stopping the organizing your life around its presence or absence, stopping the constant negotiation with your own experience. What if the anxiety comes? What if it doesn't? What if it comes and you just let it be there? Not fighting it, not feeding it, not building your whole day around whether it shows up or not. You don't have to answer that now. You don't have to do anything with it. Just notice where you are. Notice if you're here or if you're somewhere else, waiting. Notice if you're living your life or if you're living around your life, carefully, quietly, always watching. The watching itself is what you've been afraid of all along. You're doing it again. Standing in the kitchen or sitting in traffic or lying in bed at night, and suddenly you're there. In the middle of a conversation that isn't happening, with someone who isn't in the room. Saying things you've rehearsed a dozen times. Defending yourself against words they haven't spoken yet. Maybe they never will. You know this, don't you? You know the argument isn't real. But your body doesn't know that. Your chest is tight. Your jaw is clenched. Your heart is beating faster, preparing for a confrontation that exists only in your mind. And still, you keep going. You sharpen your points. You anticipate their response. You imagine their face, their tone, the exact moment they realize they were wrong. You win the argument, or sometimes you lose it. Either way, you suffer. Why are you doing this? Not because you're broken, not because something is wrong with you. You're doing this because the mind is trying to protect you. It's trying to prepare you. It's trying to control what it cannot control. The future, the other person, the outcome of something that hasn't happened and may never happen. The mind believes that if it rehearses enough, if it plans enough, if it argues enough in the silence of your own head, then maybe you'll be safe. Maybe you won't be caught off guard. Maybe you won't feel that sharp sting of being misunderstood, dismissed, or rejected. But notice what's actually happening. You're not preparing. You're suffering. Right now. In this moment. Over something that isn't here. The person you're arguing with is somewhere else, living their life, completely unaware of the fight you're having with them. And you're caught in a loop. playing the same scenes over and over, tightening around the fear of what they might say, what they might think, what they might do. You're trying to win a fight that hasn't started. You're trying to defend against a wound that hasn't been inflicted. You're trying to control a conversation that doesn't exist. And the cruelest part, even if the conversation does happen, it won't go the way you imagined. It never does. The words will be different. The tone will be different. They'll say something you didn't prepare for, and all that rehearsal, all that suffering will have been for nothing. But by then, you'll already be exhausted, already defended, already braced for impact. This is what attachment to outcome looks like. This is what the fear of loss feels like when it has nowhere to land. So it lands on a phantom, a version of someone, a version of yourself. And you fight with shadows. The Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki once said, "In the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind there are few." You become an expert in this argument. You know every line, every counter-argument, every possible ending. And because you know it so well, you're trapped in it. There's no space left, no room for anything new, just the same script playing on repeat. What if you didn't know how it would go? What if you let the future be uncertain? What if you let the other person be who they are, not who you've imagined them to be in your worst moments? You might think that sounds dangerous, unprepared, vulnerable. But look at what preparing is costing you. Look at where you are right now. Alone, arguing with no one, suffering over nothing. The argument in your head isn't protecting you, it's stealing from you. It's stealing this moment, this breath, this small piece of peace you could have right now if you weren't somewhere else fighting a war that isn't real. And maybe the hardest part to see is this: the argument isn't really about them, it's about you. It's about the fear that you're not enough, that you won't be able to handle it, that you'll be exposed, diminished, left without the right words when it matters most. So you practice. You arm yourself, you build a fortress out of sentences. But you can't live in a fortress. Not really. You can only pace its walls, watching for threats that may never come. The person isn't here, the fight isn't happening. But you are here, and the suffering is happening. Just notice that. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to stop the thoughts. You don't have to forgive anyone or let anything go. Just see it. See how the mind creates the argument. See how the body responds as if it's real. See how you disappear into a future that doesn't exist and how much it costs to live there. And then, maybe, just for a moment, come back. To the kitchen, to the traffic, to the bed, to the only place where life is actually happening. Here, now, where no one is arguing with you at all. You've been carrying this for a while now, haven't you? This quiet conviction that your age has made the decision for you, that the door closed at some point you can't quite name, and now you stand on the wrong side of it, looking through the glass at what might have been. It feels like protection, doesn't it? Like solid ground. When you say you're too old to begin, there's a strange comfort in it. A heaviness, yes, but also a kind of permission to stop wanting. To stop reaching, to finally rest in the story that time has decided for you. But notice what happens when you hold on to this. Notice how tightly you grip it. Because if you stopped using your age as a reason, you'd have to let go of the certainty. The certainty that you already know how things would turn out. That you've seen enough, lived enough to predict the ending before the beginning even arrives. You'd have to release your hold on that story, and the story has become familiar. It's become yours. You'd have to let go of being right about yourself. All those years of building an identity around what you are and aren't, what you can and cannot do. The architecture of it. The way you've arranged your life around these conclusions. If you stopped using age as the reason, you'd have to admit you don't actually know. You don't know what would happen. You don't know what you're capable of. And that not knowing, that open space, it feels like falling. you'd have to let go of the protection that limitation offers. Because when you say you're too old, no one can blame you for not trying, not even you. It's a shield against disappointment, against failure, against the vulnerability of wanting something and not receiving it. If you put the shield down, you'd be exposed. You'd have to feel the wanting without the buffer. You'd have to stand in your own longing, bare and uncertain. And you'd have to let go of the past. Not the memories, but the weight you've given them. The way you've let everything that's already happened become evidence for what cannot happen now. Every missed opportunity, every road not taken, every version of yourself you didn't become, you've been carrying them like proof. Proof that it's too late, that the best moments are behind you, that life is something that happens to the young, and you are no longer young. But watch how this creates suffering. Watch how you take the simple fact of time passing and turn it into a prison. How you take the neutral truth of your age and make it mean something about your worth, your potential, your permission to begin. The Buddha said, the trouble is, you think you have time. Notice what you'd have to let go of if age was no longer the answer. You'd have to let go of the fantasy that if you were younger, everything would be different. That fantasy has been a companion, a secret comfort. The belief that in some other version of your life, with more years ahead or fewer years behind, you would finally be brave enough, ready enough, worthy enough. But if age isn't the reason, then you have to meet yourself as you actually are right now, without the if only. You'd have to let go of comparing yourself to who you were. The energy you had, the time you had, the self you were when you were younger. You'd be measuring everything against that. And in that comparison, you always lose. Because you're trying to be someone who no longer exists, in a time that isn't here. If you stopped using age as the reason, you'd have to stop arguing with what is. You'd have to stop insisting that now should feel like then. And you'd have to let go of the audience, the invisible others you imagine judging you. The voices that whisper, it's too late, you're too old, what will people think? If you stopped using age as the reason, you'd have to admit that most of this has been a conversation with yourself, that the harshest judge has been the one inside, that you've been waiting for permission that no one else can give. What you'd have to let go of is the known suffering for the unknown possibility. Because the suffering of not beginning, of staying where you are, of telling yourself it's too late, that suffering is familiar. You know its shape. You know how to live with it. But the possibility of beginning, of not knowing what will happen, of being a beginner again in your own life, that's uncertain. And uncertainty asks you to let go of control. You'd have to let go of the belief that you've already missed it, whatever it is. That singular chance, that perfect moment, that window that supposedly closed while you weren't paying attention. You'd have to see that this belief is just another way of grasping at a story about time, about readiness, about deserving. So the question remains, doesn't it? Not what you would gain by beginning, but what you would lose by letting go of the reason not to. The identity, the protection, the certainty, the familiar weight of it all. And underneath all of that, maybe just the simple, quiet fear of wanting something and having to find out. You notice something isn't going the way you wanted. Maybe it's small. A conversation that went sideways, a plan that fell apart, someone who didn't respond the way you needed them to. And immediately there's resistance, a tightening, a pulling away from what's happening right now. But what are you actually resisting? You tell yourself it's the situation, the thing that went wrong, the person who didn't understand, the outcome you didn't choose. And yes, there's discomfort there. But if you look closer, if you sit with it for just a moment, you might notice something else underneath. You're not just resisting what happened, you're resisting the feeling of not having controlled it. There's a difference. And that difference is where so much of your suffering lives. When you resist what's happening, you're pushing against reality itself. You're saying, this shouldn't be. But when you resist the feeling of not being in control, you're pushing against something deeper. You're pushing against your own helplessness, your own smallness in the face of life's movement. And that feeling, that loss of control, it's unbearable, isn't it? It touches something old, something frightening. The sense that if you're not steering, if you're not managing, if you're not holding it all together, then everything will fall apart. Or maybe you will. So you grip tighter. You replay the conversation, trying to rewrite it. You plan for next time, rehearsing what you'll say, how you'll do it better. You analyze what went wrong, searching for the moment you lost your grip, the place where control slipped through your fingers. But the truth is, you never had it. Not really. Not the way you think you did. Life has been moving on its own this whole time. People have been making their own choices. Circumstances have been shifting without asking your permission. And somewhere along the way, you convinced yourself that if you just tried hard enough, thought carefully enough, prepared thoroughly enough, you could hold it all in place. But you can't. And you never could. And resisting that truth, resisting the feeling of not being in control, that's what exhausts you. That's what keeps you awake at 3 a.m. That's what makes you tense when the phone rings, when plans change, when someone says something unexpected. You're not afraid of what's happening, you're afraid of what it means about you. That you're not the author of your life the way you thought. That you're not as powerful as you needed to believe. That things will unfold, whether you're ready or not. The Buddha said, you can only lose what you cling to. And you've been clinging to the idea that control is possible. That if you just manage well enough, think ahead enough, protect yourself carefully enough, you can prevent the ground from shifting beneath you. But the ground is always shifting. It always has been. Every moment is already dissolving into the next. Every certainty you build is already changing. Every plan you make is meeting 1,000 other forces you can't see, can't predict, can't manage. And resisting that, resisting the truth of your own lack of control, it doesn't make you safer. It doesn't give you power. It just creates a constant hum of tension, a background fear that never quite goes away. Because you're fighting something that can't be fought. You're trying to control the fact that you can't control. And that's an exhausting, endless loop. So maybe the question isn't whether you're resisting what's happening or resisting the feeling of not being in control. Maybe the question is, can you see that you're doing both? Can you notice how they're tangled together, how one feeds the other? Can you feel the tightness in your chest when something doesn't go as planned? Can you notice the voice that immediately starts problem solving, strategizing, trying to get a grip on what just slipped away? And can you see that the suffering isn't in what happened? It's in the grasping, in the desperate need to have been the one steering. In the belief that if you weren't in control, then something is terribly wrong. Nothing is wrong. Things are just happening. Life is just moving. And you are here, in the middle of it, aware of it, feeling it, but not directing it, not the way you thought. And maybe that's unbearable. Or maybe, if you stop resisting long enough, it's just true. Just this moment, arriving without your permission. Just this breath moving through you. Just this feeling of helplessness, present and real, and not actually dangerous. Just life, happening. And you, watching it unfold. You reach for your phone again. Not because you want to see anything in particular, not because you're waiting for something important. You reach for it because something inside feels restless, something feels uncomfortable. And the phone is right there, ready to fill that space before you have to feel what's underneath. What feeling are you scrolling past right now? Maybe it's boredom. That heavy, itchy sense that this moment isn't enough. That you should be somewhere else. Doing something else, feeling something else. So you scroll, post after post after post, each one promising to be the thing that finally satisfies. But it never does. You keep scrolling. Because the boredom isn't about what's on the screen. The boredom is about not wanting to be here, in this moment, in this body, with this life, exactly as it is. Or maybe it's loneliness, that quiet ache that nobody sees you, that you're separate somehow, disconnected, so you check if anyone has reached out. You look at other people's lives, their gatherings, their connections, and the loneliness grows. Because scrolling doesn't connect you to anyone. It just shows you more evidence of the distance you already feel. And still, you scroll. Because feeling the loneliness fully, without distraction, feels too raw, too real. Maybe it's anxiety, that low hum of worry about tomorrow, next week, next year, about whether you're doing enough, being enough, moving fast enough. The phone offers you something to do, something to control. You can check, update, compare, plan. It feels productive. It feels like you're managing something, but the anxiety doesn't leave. It just gets covered over temporarily until you put the phone down and it rises again, unchanged. Or maybe it's just emptiness, not sadness exactly, not fear. Just a kind of hollowness, a sense that something is missing, that life should feel more full than this, more vibrant, more meaningful. So you scroll, looking for the thing that will fill it. A video that moves you, a post that inspires you, a message that makes you feel seen. And sometimes you find something, for a moment, but the emptiness returns, because it was never about what you were looking for. It was about not wanting to sit with the space inside that feels unfilled. You're not scrolling because you're weak. You're scrolling because you're human. Because the mind does this. It moves away from discomfort. It seeks pleasure. It tries to escape what feels difficult or dull or painful. This is what minds do. This is what your mind is doing right now. But notice what happens. The feeling you're avoiding doesn't go away. It just waits, under the surface, quiet, patient. And the more you scroll, the more you train yourself to believe that you can't handle it, that you need the distraction, that the feeling is too much, so the scrolling becomes automatic, unconscious. You reach for the phone before you even know what you're feeling. The Buddha said, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. The discomfort you feel, the boredom, the loneliness, the anxiety, the emptiness, that's just pain. It's part of being alive, part of being human. But the scrolling, the avoiding, the constant movement away from what's here, that's where the suffering grows, because you're telling yourself a story, that this feeling is wrong, that it shouldn't be here, that you need to get rid of it. And that story creates tension, resistance, a constant low-grade war with your own experience. What if you didn't scroll? Not as a rule, not as a discipline, just for a moment. What if you just let the phone stay where it is and felt what's actually here? What if you let the boredom be boring? Let the loneliness ache, let the anxiety hum, not forever, not as some kind of punishment, just for a few breaths, just to see. You might notice that the feeling isn't as solid as you thought. It moves, it shifts, it changes shape. Sometimes it gets stronger, sometimes it softens. Sometimes it reveals something underneath, another feeling, another layer. And sometimes it just passes, on its own, without you doing anything. The phone will always be there, the scroll will always be available. But the feeling you're avoiding right now, this specific restlessness, this particular ache, it won't last. It's already changing, already impermanent, already moving through you like weather moves through sky. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to understand it. You don't even have to like it. You just have to stop running from it. What feeling are you scrolling past right now? Maybe you already know. You've been carrying this weight for so long that you don't even notice it anymore. The weight of being needed, the weight of being useful, the weight of mattering because someone, somewhere, depends on you. And then the question comes, quiet and sharp, if no one needed me tomorrow, would I know who I am? You feel something shift when you ask this, something uncomfortable, because the truth is, you're not sure. You're not sure at all. You know yourself as the one who shows up, the one who helps, the one who answers the phone, who remembers the birthdays, who keeps things running. You know yourself through the eyes that look for you, through the voices that call your name, through the tasks that only you can do. But if those eyes looked away, if those voices went quiet, if those tasks disappeared, what would be left? This is where the fear lives, not in being abandoned, not in being alone, but in the terrifying possibility that without being needed, you might dissolve, that you might look for yourself and find nothing there. So you keep yourself needed. You make yourself necessary. You take on more. You say yes when you're already tired. You create problems you can solve. Because being needed feels like proof. Proof that you exist. Proof that you matter. Proof that you are someone. But notice what's happening. Notice how exhausting this is. You're not just living your life. You're constantly building evidence of your existence. Every time someone needs you, you feel a small relief. See? I'm here. I'm real. I'm someone. And every time no one calls, every time you're not invited, every time you finish everything and there's nothing left to do, the panic starts to creep in. The emptiness. The question you don't want to face. You've built your identity on being needed, and now you're trapped inside it. You can't rest because resting feels like disappearing. You can't say no because saying no feels like erasing yourself. You can't let people handle their own problems because then what would you be? The Buddha said, "You are not your roles, you are not your usefulness, you are not what others need you to be, but you are living as if you are. You are living as if being needed is the same thing as being, and the gap between those two things, that's where your suffering lives. Because being needed is impermanent, it comes and goes. People grow up, move on, become independent, forget, replace you. Needs change, circumstances shift. And if you built yourself entirely on being needed, then you're building on sand. You know this already, you felt it. The person who used to need you every day now barely texts. The road you thought would last forever ended. The way you used to matter doesn't matter anymore. And when that happens, you don't just lose the connection, you lose yourself. So you scramble. You find new people to need you, new ways to be useful, new proof that you exist. But it's never enough, is it? Because the need itself is endless. The need to be needed, the hunger to matter, the desperate grasping at anything that makes you feel solid, real, like someone. And underneath it all, the quiet terror that if you just stopped for one moment, you might discover that you don't know who you are at all. But here's what's actually happening. You do exist. You are here, right now, breathing, aware, present. You exist completely independent of anyone's need for you. You existed before anyone needed you. You exist in the moments when no one is thinking of you. You exist in the silence, in the stillness, in the space between tasks. But you've been so busy proving your existence that you've never just rested in it. The identity you've built, the helpful one, the needed one, the useful one, it's not false, but it's not you. It's something you do. It's a role you play, and you've confused the role with the one playing it. When you ask, "Would I know who I am?" you're asking the role to define the actor, but the actor exists whether the role does or not. The awareness that's reading these words right now, the one that feels the fear, the one that asks the question, that's here. That's always been here, before anyone needed you, before you became useful, before you learned to matter. You don't need to be needed to exist, but you won't believe this until you stop, until you let someone not need you and you stay anyway, until you sit with the emptiness and discover it's not empty at all, until you meet yourself outside of your usefulness and find that something remains. The question sits there unanswered, and maybe it should.